intention, or maybe he wants to shock people. I have no idea why he would masturbate in the public place. But transgression, I mean, what does transgression do? It sort of disrupts the order, and it opens up a new space for thinking, new space for acting. That is perhaps the cynic intention, to disrupt that order, to create maybe space for new thinking. The fourth thing I have, eroticism. Well, this already connects with the ecstatic ecstasy, my first point, but ecstasis and eroticism are not exactly the same. They, of course, eroticism is a form of ecstasy. For Bataille, someone like Georges Bataille, they actually are very close. For Bataille understands ecstasis almost only as eroticism. But ecstasy, as I said before, it means coming out of yourself, being connected with others. Of course, in eroticism that happens, but it could happen in many other forms. For Nietzsche, for instance, eroticism is there, but it is, he looks at ecstatic states mostly from an artistic standpoint. That's why he understands ecstasy within Greek theater. Later on, Kandinsky would take that idea and apply it to painting, visual arts. But for Heidegger, for instance, he understands ecstasy mostly as death, being towards death. So you see, like, there are at least three different ways of looking at ecstasy. Aesthetic, artistic, then you have erotic, and you have through death, through mortality. And for Heidegger, of course, being towards death reveals us certain things. It sort of opens up the space for our authentic freedom. They all somehow come together, but for the cynics, their erotic acts, let's see if I can find anything with the cynics. Not much. We don't know much about their erotic acts, but they used sexual acts. I already mentioned some, and those would be the only ones that they sort of performed. We can assume that the cynic sexual acts use certain erotic signs and symbols in order to be provocative and thereby break down the existing thought-action patterns and then create embodied thoughts, bodily thoughts. That would be their sort of erotic symbolism. But keep in mind that Greek culture was erotic all throughout, so they always used erotic symbols, including the Socratic school. My last part, the metaphorism, the metaphoric. That is a Greek word, metapherein, in German, Übertragung. Nietzsche talks about that in his first unpublished essay, Truth and Lies. Now, the cynics, by attacking people's ordinary beliefs, they try to break down image-sound relationship. And that image-sound relationship lies at the root of word formation. If you read that essay, Nietzsche shows how in our concept formations or word formations, there are at least two metaphorical acts. It is the first one, the first thing is the image and the nerve stimuli connection. An object hits me, so that's the perception, and I have an image of that object. Then the second metaphorical act, this again the transference or Übertragung, is when that image is connected to a sound or a sound combination. And then we have a word. Obviously, it is a metaphorical act, it's a creation. Nothing is eternal. No words that we use are eternal, and Nietzsche shows how the words are created by initial name givers. This is actually a poetic function. Poets do that all the time. But Nietzsche shows that he didn't talk about meaning in this essay, but I suspect that the meaning is somehow implicit in what he's saying, that of course meanings are associated with these words as well, and they are all through metaphorical acts. Now, how can we break down these patterns? Well, by attacking the spectators and their thought patterns and breaking down their perception in a way, breaking them down into their components so that they can be recreated again. I have well, in English it's actually called transference. That's a Latin-based word. Metaphor is Greek, and then Nietzsche uses the term Übertragung. Freud is going to use that term later on within a limited context in psychoanalysis. Quotation from my book, I discuss this idea. Every act of creation is a carrying over. Actually, carrying over is the English term. To carry over. It's, we don't have a substantive out of that, so we use transference. But literally it is just like in German, to carry over, Übertragung. That's the same term. And images, sounds, symbols, feelings, states of the body, blocks of sense perception are carried over from one place to another in the combusting and bursting spirit of the artist. So Nietzsche uses the term within a linguistic context as he explains the process of the creation of words. In Freud, you have, of course, within psychoanalytic context, and then I propose to use this term for spectacular experiences as we recreate images and sounds and their relationships within a new context in different forms. Many scenic acts can be construed as interpretations into perception or of perception to break down the existing image-sound patterns. Since these interceptions consist not only of words but more often than not of gestures, they can have a variety of effects on the other side. And these effects can dissolve the ordinary perception. There's one legend that sort of I thought would apply to this idea. It's a quotation from Diogenes Laertius. On one occasion, when no one came to listen to him while he was discoursing seriously, so he was talking philosophy, but he didn't have any audience, he began to whistle. And then when people flocked around him, he reproached them for coming with eagerness to folly, but being lazy and indifferent about good things. So he whistled to invite people, and then when they came, then he reproached them, he started kicking them because they came. So there's already that idea of breaking down people's ordinary perceptions for something else, maybe to recreate their perceptions. On a final note, I don't know how much time I have because I want to show some clips from a modern state. Do I have? Maybe, all right, we do have satyrs in today's world. Some performance artists use that function, satirical function. I have one example, if I can run this. I cannot show you the whole thing. It's pretty long, but maybe a small episode. His name is Jaime del Val. I don't know if anybody heard his name. A Spanish performance artist. And he uses almost all those elements that I talked about. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. He's a solo performer, usually solo. I have not seen him perform in groups. And let's see if I can have the sound. All right. Anyone heard of him? Jaime del Val. Okay, he hasn't come here yet. All right. I will make it loud. talk a little bit about his performance, why it is sort of connected to the Seder performance of the Greek times. Well, he uses public nudity. He's always naked, and he puts all that gadget on himself and projects bodily parts on the screen. He does it both indoors and outdoors. Outdoors is more complicated because he comes in conflict with the establishment, and the sounds that are harder to understand, but I think that he's recreating again the sound image patterns through his performance. He engages his audience. He projects from the bodily parts of the members of his audience. So that would be sort of something like ecstasy, being one with the audience engagement. And what else? Transgressive, obviously. Aggressive, I don't know about the aggressive part. Violence. Some of these images can be violent, depending on the audience. When I saw it in Lesbos, Greece last year, that was the first time I saw his performance, and my review of his performance will appear in the journal that that we publish, the literature publishes. It's going to come out soon. It's an electronic journal. You can all read it in English. It's basically in Lesbos, there were already problems with the place that the performance was going to take place. So, depending on the place, there could be a lot of conflicts, and violence can emerge out of those conflicts as well. So that's one part that I am not clear about, is how he uses aggression and violence within his own performance. Now, the other, if I can stop this, I have another example where he actually performs in the public place. Well, time-wise, how much time do I have left? I have
10 more minutes, no problem.
I have just conclusion. I'll sum up then. I'll wrap up. If I have time, I'll show. Otherwise, you can always type his name, Jaime Del Val, with a J, Jaime. All right, in conclusion, performance in any form, mimetic or non-mimetic, cannot be only a mental activity, which we see in our activities here with the philosophy on stage. Just as human beings are not walking minds. So all human functions, mental or physical, and it's hard to separate these two, belong together and must be sustained holistically in spectacle and performative philosophy. Since philosophy is the domain of thinking, it can easily tend to fly into the abstract domain and establish itself as separate from the body, which I believe happened in ancient Greece. I think that's the root of our problem, that with all due respect to all these schools of philosophy, what emerged out of these philosophical activities was the pride of the intellect. The pride of the intellect, and that intellect sort of, it's very easy. I mean, if you are in those who study philosophy, you could easily fly into those abstract domains of the mind. They were like Hegel. Hegel is the best example. He really flew up there. But I still like him, but it's just, I guess you see my drift, that the intellect can really fly off and lose its connection. And then when that connection is lost, then you start sort of thinking that everything that's human is rational, that it has to do with the intellect. Even in 5th century BC, athletes were, they start being made fun of. So that they become animals, you know, with no intellect. So they become subject of ridicule, and all the things that they do become nonsensical. And eventually, that also dies down. The Greeks lose their athletics team in 5th century BC. Still, the Olympic Games run, but it's never the same as before. And of course, by the time you come to the medieval age, I mean, all the bodily things are already condemned. You can read St. Augustine on that. He was ashamed of his own sexual functions when he was younger. So now, all this thing, this condemnation of the body, Nietzsche calls that the despiser of the body, as a type in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. and he's one of the first thinkers who actually exposes the problems in this contempt for the body. And also in his aesthetic idealism, which he considers, well, the critique of aesthetic idealism, which he sees as a mode of interpretation of the body and also will to power. Such a temptation must be resisted, the temptation to fly into the abstract fields, and bodily regimes in performative philosophy must be cultivated to anchor thinking onto the body. Since the body and bodily functions are primary and the animal human is silent, has no say over its destiny, or no say in the linguistic sense. The animal human cannot talk, but perform. I will end my presentation with a short note from Zarathustra, who says, "But the greater thing in which you do not want to believe is your body, and its great reason. It does not say I, but does I." Thank you very much.